You're listening to the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast, episode 33, and what really levels up as your teen goes into their new year group of high school, because it is not just the subject content and the amount of homework that increases. I'm Katie Jones, and with over 15 years in education as an award-winning high school teacher, international external examiner, and as a study coach, I've helped thousands of students skyrocket their results and confidence. And this podcast is where I share all my insights, tactics, and tips with you, the parent, so you can help your hardworking teen get happy, smart, and successful in their study, and have you both enjoy the journey along the way. This is the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Hello, wonderful VIPs, very important parents. I hope your week is going super well. And if you are here in Australia or New Zealand, then I hope that you and your teen are enjoying the last parts of the summer holidays. And if you are elsewhere in the world listening in, I know we have listeners in Singapore and the UK and the US and other places I'm sure as well that I haven't seen on the list. Then I hope that your 2023 is getting off to a great start. And although we're going to be discussing the new school year and specifically what changes you will see or they will experience as your teen moves up through years 10 through 12 or 10 to 13, this will still be super relevant for everyone, no matter when you are listening or where you are listening to this, because the insights that I'm going to share today are relevant at any time of the school year. And I'm sharing this because I know that for me as a student, all I really considered as things that would up level in each new year group was the difficulty of the subject content or the amount of homework that I'd be getting set. And those things do happen, but from my years of teaching and working with exam boards, I've realized that homework and subject content are not the only things that are up leveling each year, and that there are other more subtle but super important aspects of your teen's education and their study and the demands of their classwork and homework and assessments that are at play as they move up through the year groups. So if you're concerned about their grades, either because they need certain results for the next steps that they might want to take, or because of the impact that those results have on their confidence and their pride in themselves, or if you're just a bit worried about their life balance as their workload or homework increases, then this is the episode for you, because the hidden demands that I'm going to share with you today are going to be a huge influence on both of those. And being aware of these demands will really influence how your teen tackles those or deals with those. Because yes, the subject content does up-level a little bit each year in terms of the difficulty or level of challenge. And yes, the amount of homework may well be increasing a little bit each year as well. But I would say that for most smart and hardworking students, those are not the things that are going to end up catching them out or causing them issues. Because fairly regularly, I do get emails from parents about their teen who was doing great up to a certain point. And I have to say that years 8 and 9 are common points where this happens. And then for no clear reason, their results started slipping, even though they were still working hard, even though they got the subject content, they understood the topics that they were learning. And in fact, this is such a thing that I even made a full podcast episode on it. It's episode 6, if you want to go check that out, if any of that is resonating with you or you've seen it happen for your teen. And it really does tie in particularly well with what I'm going to talk about today. So this episode is about having full awareness for your teen of what changes they're going to experience and ensuring from the outset that those slips don't happen for your teen, or if they do, you can figure out why and then take the steps to fix it. Now, if you've been with me a little while, you have likely heard me talk about the study success formula. It's knowledge plus application equals success. And if you haven't heard me talk about that and you want to hear me explain that formula in detail, then go back and listen to episode 1 of this podcast, because that formula was devised by me over the course of probably 10 or actually 11 years of teaching, tutoring, study coaching, exam marking, coursework moderation, and also from the thousands of conversations that I've had with parents, students, teachers, and examiners. And it came from realizing that there was a whole missing piece of the study puzzle, that it wasn't just about how well students know their subject content. And I will say, realizing it way too late for me to be applying it to my own study, but therefore making me even more adamant that I want to share it with as many parents and students as possible today. Because that piece, that missing piece, is the skill of application. Your teen being able to apply the knowledge that they've been taught, that they've studied and learned in class, in homework, and applying it in the exact way that an exam question asks for it, being able to apply it in an assignment, in an essay that they're writing, in coursework, through an oral presentation or multimodal, or even just in their classwork and homework, and applying their subject knowledge in the way that meets the mark scheme criteria. So they actually answer the question, so they don't end up waffling in an essay, so they don't do more than they need to in an assignment or even in answering a question. Because I'll talk about this more in a moment, but in the lower year groups, in primary school, and really in year 7, and even kind of into year 8 really as well, just putting in as much information as possible and going over and above what has been asked for, that's what gets them good marks. Sometimes great marks, sometimes extra bonus marks. But as your teen moves up through the year levels, it's much more about them being able to respond to the question in the right way than it is about impressing their teacher or the examiner with quantity or giving them more than they ask for. In fact, especially this happens in the senior years, going off topic or going beyond what the question has asked for, even if the information is actually correct, can actually bring down their marks, because it could be considered to then lack structure or lack focus or represent a lack of understanding of the key focus of whatever is being asked for. So whilst, yes, the level of subject content does increase in terms of complexity and the amount of knowledge required, that is only half of the success formula. And from my experience, what I also see is the skills, the strategies, and the techniques in applying that knowledge are also what increase through the year groups. And from my experience, though it is not as obvious to everyone to see, what I do also see is that the skills, the strategies, and techniques in applying that knowledge also increase, especially from year 9 upwards. Because up until then, I would say that the formula is more heavily weighted towards the knowledge side of things. But this changes in year 9 and beyond as the balance swings more and more towards those skills of application. But there is no big announcement of this. There is no alert that this is happening as we move up through the year groups. It just happens in a really subtle way. So I want to help you see this, see where it is happening. And so I'll share some really specific ways that this shows up. And then if you want more help, more explanation, and see me dissect real life examples, at the end of this podcast, I'll share the details of a brand new live webinar that I'm running to kick off this new school year and that you can join me on for free. So stick around for that. So one way that you and your team will be able to see the application side of things level up is in their word counts. So the word counts will increase on assignments and essays and reports, going from maybe 800 words, say in year 8 or year 9, up to 1,000, maybe 2,000 words or beyond by year 12. But this doesn't mean that they just need to be writing and giving more and more information, that more information is simply required to make up those words. And the mistake I see so many students making is that they think they just need to include more information, more stats and facts. And if your teen has ever struggled to fill a word count, then this is likely the reason, because they've given all of the information that there is to give on the topic. And they probably end up filling about maybe 2/3 of the word count, and they just don't know what else their teacher or the marker wants. Or they might be doing the opposite and going totally overboard with their research and writing up tons of information, everything and anything related to the topic. In fact, I actually had a year 9 student recently join the 10WGT whose mum sent me her research assignment for feedback on a coaching call. And it was jam-packed with data and online research that she had spent hours and hours on. Now, she did get a good result for the task, but her mum was freaking out a little bit because she had spent a crazy amount of time and effort on that task. And the truth is that she could have gotten that same result with not even half, more like a quarter of the information and time and effort that she had put in. The trouble was she didn't have the skills yet, hence why she joined the 10WGT, to distinguish that for herself. So what do those bigger word counts really require? How is your teen supposed to fill that word count? Well, they need to do the opposite of putting in more and more descriptive information. They need to go narrow and deep. So instead of covering more and more about the topic, they need to take one aspect, which will most likely be defined in maybe the essay question or them refining a particular research or inquiry question if it's an assignment or a report. And they then need to analyze the information or the evidence or the research that they have done in detail. They might even need to evaluate it, but they basically need to go further than just describing or explaining. And they actually need to respond to what the task or the question is really asking of them, which might be to analyze the information or evaluate the sources of that information, consider different perspectives, compare and contrast different elements. So you might be noticing that this relates to one of my absolute favorite skills, the ability to identify and understand and respond to command words. So if your teen is not super clear yet or confident in all of the different levels of cognitions or levels of commands, those are describe, explain, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. If they're not super confident in all of the different command words that occur at each of those different levels of cognition, then this is where they need to work on this particular aspect of the skills of application. This isn't the only skill of application, but it will make a huge difference to how they then fill a word count. And another place that application shows up that's tightly linked to that word count is in the types of tasks that your teen will get set. So instead of just being asked to do a presentation about their favorite sport or write a project about Christianity, for example, where they simply have to compile lots of facts and information about the topic, you'll see these instead become tasks like a research investigation or an analytical essay. So unlike those projects in the lower year levels, these don't just want lots of information. They'll involve higher levels of commands like comparing or evaluating. And that means that what would have gotten them good marks back in year 7 or 8, just presenting and finding lots of researched information, will now perhaps only scrape them a C grade if they're lucky. Because at the higher year levels, the tasks are much more about what they do with that information rather than just finding it or knowing it. And likewise, this is the case in tests and exams as well. Now, if you ever get to see one of your teens' tests or exams, because I do know that a lot of times they don't get to actually bring them home, but you can always just go and check out a past paper on an exam board website if you do want to check this out. And if you scan through, you'll notice that as we go up through the year levels, there are going to be fewer short response questions and more of the extended response questions. So fewer 1 or 2 or 3 mark questions and more of the 6 or 7 or 10 or even 20, even 30 mark questions. And just like the word count of essays and reports, this does not mean that they need more and more information. So an 8-mark question does not require 8 facts. Not at the higher year levels. It might do in year 7 or 8. And the wording of these questions will also change accordingly. So the command will less likely to be something like state or define. It will be discuss or justify, or one of many others at those higher cognitive levels. And so your teen's skills of application will need to match these. So they apply their subject knowledge to respond to the exam or test question and the way that it is worded. So they're going to want to become a master at dissecting the wording of the question, so they know exactly what it is asking them, and B, be able to respond in the way that the mark scheme that matches that wording of that question demands from them. And so one more example that I'll share today of the application element in action as your teen moves up through the year groups is in the marking criteria or the rubrics or the success criteria for assessments and exams. Now, I know that back in our day, we never used to get given any of this when we were students. But these days, your teen will often have success criteria attached to assignments or rubrics provided with coursework. And for the external exams, most past papers on external exam board websites have the mark schemes published with them as well. And if you compare a mark scheme for a year 7 or 8 exam or assignment with one for a year 11 or year 12 or even a year 9 or 10 assessment, you'll notice that, yes, the subject content is at a higher level, but also the ways that the responses are actually marked is different. It's less about the answer is this, and here it is on the mark scheme. And it's not just about the content or the information in an answer. It's much more about the quality and the level of the discussion of that information. So, for example, a senior research task will have levels of response. It'll have descriptors that go from statements like provides some evidence through to discerning analysis of evidence. And your team needs to know the difference between what is a detailed analysis and a discerning analysis. And so I'll give it a little word of caution here as well, that saving and using scaffolds or outlines of tasks from previous years doesn't always work or help. Now, I will caveat this because I do sometimes say for students in senior years, sometimes scaffolds will be given, say, for a task in year 11 that will really be prepping them for a very similar task that they have to complete independently in year 12. So I do sometimes say to students that they should definitely save scaffolds for those. But for lower year groups, students need to be careful that they aren't limiting themselves to lower levels of response and demands that previous scaffolds would have been matched to, but that aren't going to be sufficient for the levels they need to be operating at in a new or higher year group. So just a little word of warning and caution there. And so you might have started to realize that all of these examples have a bit of a common theme here, and that much of this revolves around those good old command words that I like to always focus on and the hierarchy of them. And this is why I always say that if I could only train a student in one thing, it would be command words, getting in-depth knowledge and understanding of them and what they mean and how to respond to them at the right levels. Because this skill infiltrates so many elements of their study and how the requirements up level through their year groups. And it is critical to that application element of the study success formula. It's not the only part of the application element, but it is one of the most significant parts. And so what I hope is that this episode will help you spot some of the more subtle and hidden demands of your teen's new year level and how they can meet those demands by developing, honing, and actioning the skills of application so that they maximize that subject knowledge and have both parts of the study success formula nailed. Because the knowledge part is what they are guided through and certainly focused on almost exclusively throughout their schooling. But the application of that knowledge is the part that often goes under the radar and is given little attention aside from maybe the odd study skills workshop. Yet in my experience, it's the part that becomes more and more relevant and important as your teen moves up through their year groups. Because no Year 12 essay question ever simply asks, tell me everything you know about topic X, whatever that is. And yet that's how many hardworking students have achieved success through the earlier years of their education, by telling their teacher everything they know about topic X in a particular report, or giving as much information as possible in an exam answer, and going over and above in the way that they present it or in their fact-finding mission and giving more than what has been asked for. But that's the opposite of what students need to do as they move up through the year levels. So if you would like to learn more about what happens as students go up through these year groups and see me dissect and explain real life examples of these in action at specific different year levels, or if you're thinking that, yes, your teen really could use some of these skills of application and you're interested in seeing how they can get training directly from me in them through the 10-week Grade Transformation Program, and want to make sure that they can up level in this area in line with their subject knowledge this year and every year beyond, then definitely register for my brand new live parent webinar. I'm running it on Wednesday, the 1st of February, to kick off the new school year. It is totally free to register. And if you're listening to this before the 1st of February, you can go do that right now. www.gradetransformation.com/new and save your spot at the webinar. Now, it is a live webinar and we're starting at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So that's 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for those of you in New South Wales or Victoria. That's 5 p.m. in WA, and everyone else, you're going to have to check your own time zone. I used to love the novelty of hearing all of the different time zones on the radio news when I first moved to Australia, because coming from the UK, it just felt very exotic to have so many time zones in one country. But I have to say, when I'm now having to share them, it becomes a bit of a mouthful. So that's my mini version. And if you can't make it live, do not worry. There will be a replay that we send out to those who register. So still make sure you register to get that, but you really will want to do whatever you can to make it live, because there are going to be a few special bonus inclusions that won't be in the replay. There is going to be a special secret segment with a bonus strategy that I have just recently decided to add in. And we have a very special competition for live attendees to win a personal coaching session with me for your teen. Plus, I'm sharing a free resource download with my top 5 Google tips so that your teen can get the information that they need for that knowledge part of the success formula quickly and easily, without spending hours researching and ending up with useless sources or going down rabbit holes, and instead spend their energy and their brain power and their time on applying that information at the highest levels. So register for the webinar for free. www.gradetransformation.com/new. It's on Wednesday, the 1st of February, 7 p.m. AEST. Please check your time zone. And I'll put that link in the show notes so you can just click directly on it and get the exact steps, how to, and examples to have your teen meeting all of the demands of their new year group, the obvious ones and the more subtle ones, and do it with confidence and a huge amount of success. I want you to feel really excited for what this year, 2023, will be for your teen. I hope that this episode is the first step in having that happen. I hope you have a wonderful week. Go register for the webinar, share it with any other parents of hardworking teens that could benefit from it. And I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. If you're ready to have your teen achieve their best possible results with less stress, then I want to invite you to enroll them in the 10-week Grade Transformation Program, where they're going to learn the key concepts, skills, and strategies to catapult their performance in assessments and exams. It's risk-free. They either achieve bigger and better results with a whole lot more confidence in 10 weeks, or we refund you in full. Just head over to www.rocksolidstudy.com/program, and I'll see you there.